Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me all right? So when Ishan reached me first about talking today, me and Ishan have worked on a committee before. When he reached out to me, I started thinking, what should I talk to this audience about? Should I talk about business? Should I talk about hospitality? Should I talk about technology? Areas of my expertise. But then, piggybacking off of what Vivian just mentioned, I thought it might be valuable to talk about mental blocks. I thought it might be value added to talk about mental barriers. And so I thought, what better opportunity, what better subject than to talk about how to develop dimensions of our intellect, specifically ethical intelligence, emotional intelligence, and spiritual intelligence. As I see around this hall and backstage, many of you are in the stage of life where you are at the starting point of the most productive part of your life. Many of you are going to break those barriers in future decade or so. So I thought, why not spend a little bit of time on developing these dimensions or talking about developing these dimensions of our intellect. The first on the list is ethical intelligence. And I have a little visual here to make sure that you stay with me. I may be the oldest speaker today, so bear with me, boring talk. If I went around this hall and asked you guys, do we know the difference between right and wrong? If I asked you guys, did we have a moral compass, if you would? Many of you would respond in a resounding yes, right? Why then many good people are caught doing bad things? Why then, if when we go around the world, we find people who are in controlling positions doing bad things? Why do you think that they don't know the difference between right and wrong? You think they didn't know what they were doing or they were about to do was wrong? Of course they did. Of course all of us do. Why then people slip? Why then people who are seemingly good do bad things? Reminds me of a movie from 1990s acted by Bill Paxton and Bridget Fonda called Simple Plan, right? Good people doing bad things. These may include politicians, teachers, business leaders, artists, people who have influence over entire generations. Why do you think these people are caught doing bad things? Well, that's because ethics, in specific, is a skill. It's a skill that needs to be developed. It's a skill that needs to be practiced. We may think that it is natural to us, but it takes a lot of practice. Think about a baseball player, a pitcher, for example, right? A pitcher would know with what speed, at what angle, using what technique, he or she can pitch that ball to get the best outcome, right? But that takes a lot of practice. Remember the 10,000-hour rule, right? For you to be an expert on anything, it requires a lot of practice. How then, without us practicing our skills, can we think that when a ethically compromising situation arises, that we will do the right thing? That we can count on us to come out with the right action? What I'm going to talk about today has something to do with what frameworks are there that we can use to practice those skills. Let's talk about ethical intelligence first and how we develop that. The framework that's up here involves 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical decision-making, that you can practice to, 6 steps of decision-making, ethical to improve your ethical decision making, so to speak. Step number 1 talks about listing and identifying facts. Step number 2 talks about listing and identifying stakeholders that are involved in the situation. Step number 3 talks about listing all the possible ethical issues. Step number 4, identifying alternative actions, right? Step number 5, which is the most important one, talks about evaluating your action, evaluating those possible alternative actions against the 3 theoretical frameworks, which are very important, in my opinion. And stay with me here. I don't know whether you've heard about them before or not, but stay with me here. The first, called the utilitarian framework, which says an action should create a greater good, a common good, a good that everybody can benefit from, that most number of people can benefit from. The second school of thought is deontology theory, which relies upon the idea that there is a set of roles, rights, and responsibilities for everybody in a situation, right? If you were a political leader, you have certain responsibilities towards your constituents. If you're a citizen, you have certain rights, but at the same time, you have certain responsibilities in any given situation. Last but not least is the virtue framework, which tells you how to act based on your beliefs, based on your values, based on your culture, based on how you have been taught, right? All the possible alternative actions you evaluate against the measure of these 3 theoretical frameworks, more than likely is going to yield you an outcome that is going to be carefully balanced, as in the ethical world we call it. It's going to be a carefully balanced action. More than likely, more than 90% of the times, that action would be the right action to take, right? Second framework that I want to present to you and talk to you about is developing emotional intelligence, right? It's got 4 elements to it. First, the self-awareness. Second, the social awareness. Third, the self-management. And fourth, the relationship management. Self-awareness is very intuitive, right? Using our own cognitive, emotional, and behavioral aspects, you kind of create a self-reflection scale on which you measure how self-aware you are in a particular situation. Social awareness is the element in which you use values or your inner aspects like empathy, respect, curiosity, compassion, to realize that something exists around you that you need to be aware of when you're taking an action. Self-management is all about using your values, using your compassion, using management techniques, so to speak, of perceiving your emotions, managing your emotions, and regulating your emotions to come up with the best possible action plan for managing your time, managing yourself, managing your stress, managing your goals, what have you. And then last but not least, the relationship management, in which you use verbal and nonverbal communication methodologies to kind of come up with an action plan for conflict resolution, and thereby installing trust in relationships, right? When you work on all these 4 elements, more than likely, you will come out with an emotionally intelligent action at the end of it. And then third element or third dimension of intellect that I wanted to talk about today is the spiritual one, right? Most of us know that the left side of our brain is processing information serially, right? the process of dissecting, inferring, expanding upon our understanding, right? That processing does, left side of our brain does. And the right side is processing information parallelly, right? Sort of dealing with the emotional part of the information that we get, right? But then there is a third quotient. So the first one is called the intellectual quotient, the second one called the emotional quotient, but then there is a third quotient, which is the spiritual one, which is rather comprehensive in nature, which can have impacts on your entire brain, both sides, right? There's a beautiful construct in a Hindu scripture called Bhagavad Gita, right? And it goes, Karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, ma karma hetur phal heturbhu ma te sango swakarmani, which means your responsibility, your task, your role is to do the deed. You neither have control over its outcomes, nor you have any claims on it, right? So if you carry out your task with utmost sincerity, honesty, dedication, that's all you can do. That's all you should do. This beautiful construct completely detaches you from outcomes of your actions, right? And thereby creating this beautiful ideology where you're only focused on the task at hand, not worried about what's going to happen if I do this or do that. If you were right in carrying out the action, it will more likely yield results that will benefit everybody, including yourself, right? So that's the third dimension of our intellect. And so these are the three dimensions. If we practice enough number of times, more than likely, as a generation that's going to control a lot of things in the future, you guys are the leaders of the future world. If we practice these three dimensions, trust me, we will create a much better society around us.